The balance breakdown is back to put some balance back into your life. UFC 292 is in the books, and we have a new middleweight champion. Sean Strickland won a unanimous decision over Israel Adesanya in the main event. We're completely flipping the script on what we normally do. Army, I'm going to hand it over to Harry to kind of give his kind of take on the card. We're getting straight into it because we could probably do a full podcast on the main event here. And looking on Saturday night, it was an upset. It was a shock. You know, given the circumstances that were surrounding the fight, no one was going to expect what we seen. Maybe there was, like, you know, slight chances of Sean Strickland doing it, but the way he did it, really without too much kind of fight back at all, really. It was fairly one-sided. It was fairly kind of set in stone. There was no cliffhanger on the results. It was either going to be a 49-46 or a 48-47. You know, we can talk about the scoring of it a little bit. Myself, I had the 49-46, but nonetheless, Sean Strickland did it. Harry, what was your immediate reaction when you were watching the fight? I guess the big turning point came with that knockdown in the first round, but maybe let's just talk about, if you want to talk about from the start of the fight, we can go from there. If you want to talk about your immediate reaction, you can go from there. The floor is yours, man. Were you shocked?
I was shocked in the first round. I was not shocked in the second. And then by the midway of the third, I was like, he's going to do this. This is how this fight's going to go. Like, he is going to do this for the next couple of rounds. And for that, I was so impressed. Really, really was. I could not have been more impressed with the Sean Strickland performance. I think for me, the turning point was not the dropping in the first round. I feel like a lot of the work had already been cemented by the time the drop happened. I think the function of the work and the end result of the work was him dropping Israel Adesanya and then swarming him and landing the shots he did in the first round. But to me, he forced Israel to be a frog in boiling water, right? And he just slowly turned up the pressure cooker until the point where in that first round, Israel Adesanya was in boiling water and hadn't even realized until he started to hit the mat, right? And that was a performance that I absolutely did not expect. I called, and all of us called on the preview show, that if Sean Strickland wanted to go out and win this fight, he was going to do it in an MMA fashion. He was going to have to try and mix some takedowns. He was going to have to look to try and level change, push him up against the fence, make it gritty, make it dirty, make it grimy, rub his face into him, do all of the things that we would expect in order for a Sean Strickland type of fighter to go out against an Israel Adesanya type fighter. And yet Sean came out and he just took everything away from Israel, specifically in that first round. And maybe it's useful that we go round by round, right? The thing that, and you know, obviously jump in as and when you're ready. The thing about the first round that impressed me so much was just the patience and the efficiency of movement from Sean Strickland. He bit on feints, but he never bit so hard that he left himself open. He always, like, let's say Izzy would throw a hip feint. Sean would look at it with his eyes, keep his hands where they were, and maybe just open his body a little in case something came. So he was biting on the feint, but he was reacting in an intelligent way. He wasn't opening himself up to a counter. When Israel was looking for the left foot feints or the shoulder rolls or moving his eyes, Sean would match with an intelligent reaction. He wasn't just sticking his arms out or, you know, doing something mad that was going to get him countered. Go on.
And that's the first point I want to make. I think that's one of the adjustments that we've seen with Sean Strickland, because we had seen in his last couple of fights that he bites hard on a lot of feints. He did it against Alex Bahia. He's done it against a lot of other fighters too. Something that we probably didn't see him or get the chance to see him, and how he adjusted that against Abus Magomedov, because, you know, Magomedov wasn't good enough to bring that out of him. And I think that that's the read that Israel kind of made before this fight too. And I didn't even get a chance to say it on the preview show, but I felt that Izzy was going to try and work the calf kick and work the body kick to try and get Sean to react. Because I had seen Sean Strickland defend body kicks with two hands coming down to try and block that leg before, which leaves the chin wide open. And we seen in the first round, Israel Adesanya go for the head kick, go for the question mark kick, which is an illusion for a body kick, to go to the head. And the anticipation I think Izzy thought he was going to get from Sean Strickland in that first round was for him to bite on that and for him to maybe connect with a head kick. I almost went with a prediction saying that I think that Israel is going to knock him out with a head kick because of that reason at all. But to counteract that, like you said, Sean Strickland did so excellently, but still simple. It was a simplistic excellence, really, at the end of the day. Like, we were at loggerheads and for many years talking about how to kind of decode fighters, how to kind of beat fighters, and we didn't manage to do it this time. And what Sean Strickland and his team, and I think it's important to say his team at Team Extreme Couture, did so excellently was to do it in such a simplistic manner. With basically, a couple of small things like not biting on the feints, making mini adjustments, just firing the 1-2, not getting too fancy with your punches, just coming in with your 1-2 and having a pretty tight kind of Philly shell defense as well, which was very interesting. But I think the biggest factor here, which we have kind of seen in the last couple of Israel's fights with Alex Bahia, and I think it's something that Sean Strickland kind of brought into this fight too, was just a simple lack of respect for the skills of Israel Adesanya. Whether that's, that's genius now, but that could have also been stupid as well at the same time if he had got caught. But it's like, it's crazy. It's just a crazy game. It's like, I haven't fully processed what happens yet. I haven't fully got my thoughts around it. So there's going to be a lot of raw opinion that's coming in here, but a really kind of simplistic game plan, but an effective game plan. And it's like, we're not looking for great equations inside the octagon. You're just looking for effectiveness. And it's crazy to say, out of all the shit that we've talked about Sean Strickland and on everything, that he brought in a style that was effective and that worked against Israel Adesanya and worked very, very well.
Agreed. I think the stall that Sean Strickland set out immediately in the first round to me, right, was he would force Israel Adesanya behind the tram line. Now, in the second round, and we'll get to the second round in a second because I think it's pivotal, when Israel is forced behind the tram line, this is going to sound ridiculous, but just let me go with it. There's less space, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's a simplistic way, isn't it? You're cutting off that cage.
And what Israel is so good at, and what we saw in the second round, is he fades away to the left, he fades away to the right, and he makes you think, because his body is in the same place, he makes you think that the jab is available or the 2 is available. And because it's not there, that gives him an extra second for him to counter or land whatever shots. And we saw him do that because of the better footwork he was using in the second round. But in the first round, Sean would just penetrate step with his left foot, just shifting inch by inch forward, forcing Israel Adesanya back. As we've already said, he bites on the feint, but he does so with intelligent reactions. And so he's not giving Israel anything. And to that, in of itself, Israel's not used to that, right? He's used to people making reactions and biting on things. Even Alex Bahia was biting on reactions, right? And so that then
maybe we mentioned up at Alex Bahia too, and you mentioned about getting Israel behind the tram line, and it's Alex Bahia was the first person we saw really truly kind of make that effective adjustment against Israel, which caused him problems in the first fight with Alex, and to be fair, before Alex got knocked out, caused Israel problems in the second fight as well. And I think that Sean Strickland kind of picked up on that and used that kind of pressure really, really well. And it is simple. You're doing that to kind of put Israel in a box because you want to make him feel a little bit uncomfortable. You want to make Israel, when you're cutting off the cage and you're applying pressure and you're putting him behind the tram line, you want to make him think about, how am I going to get out of this position, rather than what punch am I going to throw or how am I going to counter this. So what Bahia did, but what I think Strickland did more effectively was kind of do it where, you know, he gave Israel the inability to kind of land any big shots or land any counter shots, because he wasn't throwing all that much either as well. It's just so interesting, like, and you know, I'm actively kind of breaking it down in my head here, but it was like, if you get in Israel concentrating more so on his footwork rather than what combinations and punches he's going to throw, it seems to be the key to, you know, taking him off his game, and by and applying pressure, and like you said, getting him behind the tram line. It was a very effective way to do it, and we've maybe seen snippets of it in the Bahia fight, but we saw it to an absolute T on Saturday night from Sean Strickland.
So I think the thing that we also have to remember is in the first Alex Bahia fight, and this is, I think, where Israel took some of his inspiration for his game plan in the first round, is we remember it was rounds 1 or rounds 2 of the first fight. Alex Bahia wades on in, Israel catches him with the right hand and almost puts Alex Bahia away, right? And I think that he and his team likely had a game plan of, well, Sean is a pressure fighter. We know this, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to draw him on, and just like we did against Bahia, because Sean Strickland on paper is not the striker of Alex Bahia's level. The difference, I think, and one of the things, so I was just setting the stall out of what I thought Sean brought in that first round. Sean Strickland doesn't possess the power of Alex Bahia, right? But Alex Bahia sometimes leans on that a little bit too heavily. He expects that one punch is just going to get things done, and if he just lands one, we're going home.
And he had that problem against Jan Blachowicz in his light heavyweight fight as well. Is that it's this adjustment that Alex is going to have to pay. But enough about Alex. Let's concentrate on Izzy and Sean Strickland here. The big turning moment. The big turning moment for me came in round 1. I know, even though Izzy did come back, but the fight that I kind of was wondering what I was going to see, was it going to be, you know, an attack-minded Izzy, or was it going to be kind of a, you know, on the back foot, kind of pick apart kind of a performance from Izzy? I think that decision for me was made for Izzy in the first round, one way or another. And I know you slightly disagree about what you've seen in the second round, but for me, once he got dropped, I was like, oh, I'm wondering, is Izzy going to go into his shell here? And to his credit, you know, he didn't really go into his shell in round 2, but kind of did again in rounds 3, 4, and 5. But talk to me about the setup to the shot that dropped Israel Adesanya. And then, by all means, if you wanted to go on into the second round and describe what Izzy did to try and he had to try and claw back that round, and did very well to do so too.
Sure. So one of the pivotal points, so we've already mentioned Sean Strickland's footwork, right? Just inching forward, lots of penetration steps, allowed Israel to stray, but then cut the cage off really, really well. That's one of the massive parts of his game. The jab was obviously very pivotal. I think the thing we haven't mentioned yet that we need to mention is the teeps, right? Because the teeps do a job. The teeps do a job in that he's essentially just pushing Israel back. Imagine if he had 2 hands and he's just pushing him backwards and pushing him backwards and pushing him backwards. The moment Israel started to step out, Sean would just land a teep. And it's not a teep that is going to keel you over. It's not a teep that's going to burst a liver. It's just a teep that's going to just force you to take one step back. And that one step back, he's then going to step into that range. And again, the defensive work he was doing with the Philly shell that you've already mentioned, that's forcing Israel to make decisions he didn't want to. And this is where the extra layer that I was so impressed with Sean Strickland comes in. And it's twofold. I saw loads of people talking online about, oh, Sean's defense is great. But they're not talking about what actually he was doing. So the first defensive thing he did that forced the opening was hand fighting. So every time Israel would leave out that parry hand that he does, whether it's a left hand or a right hand, depending on what stance he's in, Sean immediately went outside the grip, takes a grip of the hand and starts to push it down.
Yeah.
Immediately starts to push it down, immediately starts to push it down. What Israel wants Sean to do is to cower on it, watch where it's going, put his face in front of it so Israel can turn it into a hook or a body shot or whatever it is. Sean did none of that. He just immediately got hold of the hand and started to manipulate it. So the shot itself, Israel was backed up against the fence. Sean was cutting the cage to his right-hand side. Israel started to begin to push the parry hand for his right hand out. And because Sean didn't want to overextend and knew that the right hand was available because Izzy was strafing into that line, instead of grabbing the hand, he just jabbed the hand. Now, that jabbing of the hand forces the hand to come down, and Israel's hand is no longer able to come up and force to his face. He's already wanting to throw the check left hook with his left hand, and the right hand comes straight down the pocket, and down goes Israel.
It's classic. That's classic boxing technique. You're jabbing
100%.
hands, you're parrying punches. I've seen guys pull. I even got taught the technique yourself, where you're coming through with your jabbing hand and you're pulling down a guy's hand so that you know that you can get the right hand through. It was excellent work. I also want to talk about the defense of Sean Strickland to Israel's teep kicks to the body, and also the calf kick as well. His upright stance made him allowed to kind of check that inside calf kick so much better, but there was no body kick or there was no teep kick thrown by Israel Adesanya that Sean Strickland didn't try to catch. And you would think that that's what Israel wanted, but he caught it and he held it and he put Israel off that. If you go back and look at most of the teeps, it was a battle of teeps. You were right. What Sean Strickland was going to do was throw that teep there to get Israel Adesanya moving back behind that threshold. And what Israel Adesanya was trying to do was to get that teep off so that he could get himself out of the tram hole. So you had this battle of teep kicks, and the difference between the two is that Sean was more aware and more active on the teep kicks, where he was not accepting them being landed. Okay, they might have briefly landed, but he was catching them. And what was he doing after he catches them? He uses a classic Muay Thai style to draw Izzy and move him on the back foot as well. It was the same when the kick came to the body. And also the calf kicks weren't really working too much for Izzy. And when you take away that kind of game from Izzy as well, it leaves him a little bit guessing, because he is an excellent guy at working low so that he can eventually work high. And I think just Sean Strickland took that away from him in the first round and throughout the fight as well. Obviously, we had that resurgence in round 2. From Israel, where he picked up the only round of the fight, and deservingly so too, and showed that little bit of heart in round 2. And I guess my big criticism for Israel Adesanya, and we can get into the rest of the fight as well, we'll work through the rounds. Where was the fight for the rest of the fight? You had it there in a brief moment in round 2, but where was it in round 3? And where was it in round 4? Where was it in round 5? Let's talk about round 2 first.
So the difference in round 2 was volume. That was the answer. He came out immediately and he just started to push the jab in Sean Strickland's face. He started to throw the low kick, regardless of whether he landed it or not. He just needed something out there to dissuade Sean Strickland's forward movement. Because, as we've already mentioned, Sean Strickland put so much effort and emphasis into his defensive work. He's not an idiot, where if lots and lots of shots are raining in, he's not just going to wade through those shots. I think he was very aware that if he allowed the shots to start landing, Izzy is an accumulation fighter. And if he knows and starts to land shots, the confidence builds. And I think an underlying point of this fight, which is so pivotal, and you mentioned it already, is the lack of respect that Sean Strickland had for Israel. The moment that happens, the confidence starts to dip in Israel. And I think
it kind of was a double-edged sword in this fight, where you had a lack of respect for Israel Adesanya, and for Israel Adesanya, not enough respect for Sean Strickland.
I agree. And so Israel managed to land more volume. And as he landed more volume, the cage became more open. You saw him circle out way easier back to the center. Sean Strickland's cage cutting was less effective. The penetration steps were less effective. And Israel landed well, landed some really nice check left hooks. He went to the body. Like, one of the things I wrote in my notes in the first round was, why is he not attacking the body with his fists? Why is he not? He does such a great job at peeling to the left and landing that left hook to the liver. He didn't throw it once. I didn't see him going with aggression to the outside low kicks in the first round. In the second round, he threw his entire arsenal, right? And Sean Strickland, you could tell, whilst he was very patient and very calm and was very available and still trying to stick to the same game plan, he believed in that game plan. If Israel had stuck to the same game plan in the second, we would have had a closer fight. But the thing I noticed too was, I think the panic started to build in Israel in that second round, because I made a note, and this is not a note that I would usually make, because this is a potentially a silly note, but I'll say it, I'll go out on a limb. Notice at the end of the second round how much Israel Adesanya is sweating in comparison to how much Sean Strickland is sweating. Israel Adesanya in that second round worked so hard, and in the first round worked so hard to keep himself available and to allow himself the positions in which he can land his shots. Sean Strickland is dry as a bone. Dry as a bone. That tells you something about the output and the emphasis, because we're not grappling, right? If we're grappling, both lads are definitely going to be sweaty. That's just how it is, right?
I think it was a little bit down to the fact that Israel was forced to move a little bit more than he would have liked on the back foot as well, which, you know, much more harder to fight on the back foot than it is on the front foot. We've spoken about this on the breakdown and the preview show quite often, is that, you know, this foot battle, this pressure battle is so important in modern mixed martial arts, and that, you know, you can be effective on moving on the back foot, but you've got to have a fucking cardio tank going in there if you're going to fight on the back foot for the majority of the fight. And it was those little small predicaments that Israel was not able to kind of get over on the night. And you know, a resurgence in round 2 for Israel, and it was a good one, but it was Strickland that bounced back in rounds 3, which was a close round, and then even more so in round 4 and round 5 as well.
Yeah, I mean, round 3, I think, is a very close round. Shawnee Podcast tweeted that it was a very close round, and I agree. I think, and again, I'm not going to lament on Izzy for his performance in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, because I think Sean's adjustments were just so good and so clean that Israel.
But like, let's judge him based off what we've been talking about. And if we're going to talk about him as an all-time great, we should criticize him as an all-time great. And great fighters do find a way to make it happen. And Israel was not able to do it. That's what I'm not going to go up in arms and say that Izzy is shite or anything like that. But, you know what I mean? I've had my critics about Israel and his fight style. And, you know, Ian Gary was on the MMA Hour today and he was asked about it. And I would agree with what he said. And that I think that Izzy gets caught up sometimes in fighting not to lose rather than fighting to win. And I think a mixture of that mentality, you know, with things not going his way and maybe confidence kind of dwindling a little bit, it's like, you know, other fighters make it happen in that situation, to be honest. But look, Izzy wasn't able to happen, and I'm going to say that now, but I'd also say in the same breath that I would probably fancy Izzy in a rematch. But we'll talk about what's next anyway. But you don't want to be I'll be the guy that'll criticize. That's fair enough. I'll do that way. You don't want to. You don't have to. What would your assessment of that be?
So I think we absolutely have to criticize him, right? I'm not saying we shouldn't criticize him, but I think, though, that what Sean Strickland learned in that second round is that volume kills him in this fight. And so in the 3rd round, he went out and he was even more defensively minded. And this is the thing that I can't wrap my fucking head around in this fight. I just can't figure it out, is when, because I agree with you, Izzy went in those 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and he went in to not lose. He didn't go in to win. That was my read. He didn't take as many chances as he should have and could have. And Sean Strickland, because of his adherence to his defensive game plan, was able to land more. And I don't know whether that's
why is that? Like, I'm struggling to, and it's the thing, Harry. Like, and I don't want to sound like a damn broken record when I talk about Israel, because I always bring up here. I'm going to let you guess what fight I'm going to bring up. Go on.
Oh, I mean, there's fucking loads, isn't there?
Kelvin Gastelum fight.
Right.
When the Kelvin Gastelum fight, where he's coming out and he has this mentality about him, where he's willing to die for this. Could you say, Harry, that Israel Adesanya was willing to die for the win based off what you've seen on his performance on Saturday night?
Not even a shadow of a doubt. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think,
and I'm confused as to what where that mentality is gone. Does it go with motivation, with competition? Because, you know, Kelvin Gastelum, I know he proved a tricky customer for Israel on the night, but, you know, skills for skills, you would have thought Israel would have won that fight, but he was pushed and he responded that night. And that's the Israel Adesanya that I love and most enjoy watching. And I think that we saw a glimmer of that against Alex Bahia in the last fight. And I might being a little bit foolhardy to expect that I was going to see that version again. Now, me wanting to see that version is me being very selfish in wanting to see a fighter fight the way I want to see him fight, not what makes him feel comfortable or in control inside the octagon. But like I'll just go based off my opinion. And it's just this big predicament with Israel where it seems to have turned in most of his recent fights in talking a good game, walking a good game, but not actually going in and delivering when it matters in the octagon. You had, I don't know, because I'm very wary of like completely obliterating Israel Adesanya here and all. I don't want to do that, but it's just my assessment. Like I assess him in the good times, and I have to assess him here in the bad times as well. And it's like, in certain ways, a result like this was waiting to happen for Israel.
So I think that I have an outlandish take and a less outlandish take. My less outlandish take is where I'll start, right? And we'll get the boring bits out first. My less outlandish take is he's 34 years of age and he's had 3 combat sports careers. He's had a boxing career, he's had a kickboxing career, and now he's had a full MMA career. I completely agree with you that everyone's time comes, right? And maybe over the last little while, we have just been watching Israel Adesanya's time come, and Sean Strickland had the perfect style, the perfect game plan, and he met Israel at the right time on his either at the absolute apex, slightly coming over the hill, or on his decline.
And that's something that's not talked about enough in MMA. I don't think, Harry, is timing sometimes can be essential, and we spoke of Ian Gary earlier. I think the timing and his entry into the welterweight division is coming at pretty good timing for him. But at the same time, I feel that we didn't see, and not to take away from Sean Strickland's performance, we didn't see Israel perform to the 100% levels of his capabilities, even at this stage of his career in there on Saturday. For one reason or another, he didn't choose to speak to the media. That was his own right. But, it leaves us with the question of what happened. And I'm sure he's asking himself that question as well. Longevity in the game and how long that lasts for, that's definitely one thing. Just having an off night is another thing. Lack of motivation, lack of preparation is another thing. Just the way all this was put together just didn't even feel right, to be honest. A month ago, before the fight had happened, it wasn't even announced. So you're wondering what kind of a mindset that Israel had coming into this fight. But, those are all the factors that, we can always speculate on, but it doesn't really matter. If you go out there and you don't perform, you have to take the criticism as well.
Maybe we did see him at 100% of his capabilities on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we did. Maybe that second round was his 2023 11th, whenever it was, the 10th of September version of Kelvin Gastelum round 5. Maybe that is what's left, and I think if it is, then Israel Adesanya is not the fighter that we once knew and loved. And Israel Adesanya needs to have a serious think about what he wants to do in his combat sports career next, because you mentioned about motivation. He's done some podcasts recently where he's talking about this documentary he has coming out, right? And he hints in there that there is extremely raw vulnerability that not many fighters show. And I'll be interested to watch when it comes out to see what that vulnerability is, because maybe he knows that his time is limited. He feels like, and again, this is moving more to my outlandish take now, right? But my outlandish take is that Israel Adesanya, for the longest time, has built almost a pseudonym of himself, right? He's built a character that he plays, and there's this vulnerability just simmering underneath it that you can kind of feel.
I 100% agree. That is such a good read on what he is. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
It's the dancing, it's the celebrations afterwards, it's this alter ego that he uplifts. And I think lots of fighters do it. And I know that we talk all the time about fucking Conor McGregor, but Conor was a guy that just dialed himself up to 11. If you spoke to Conor in the pub, or you saw him in a documentary on the yellow mats of the old Nace Road, he's the same guy, just under the lights. He's just cranked up a little bit. This isn't Colby Covington, where he's completely reinventing a character that he's playing, but it feels like Israel Adesanya is doing so where Colby did it for the necessity of his job, and he lent into something completely outlandish that you couldn't even begin to believe that it was true of him, Israel feels like he's created a character of who he would like to be, right? And then when he stares down the barrel of a Sean Strickland, who is just not giving him any respect or any time or any ability to be who he wants to be, I feel like we see an element of peering into the soul of Israel Adesanya. And go on.
No. Go ahead and finish.
I think that when you peer into the soul of another man, you see what happened in the last 11 seconds of round 5. Sean Strickland is standing in front of him, screaming at him, telling him, I fucking won this fight. I've done this. That to me is Sean Strickland in some, and I pray it's for Sean Strickland, is proving to himself that he deserves something. It's proving to himself that he's capable of achieving something. Now, whatever he said in the press conference is whatever it is. I hope that Sean Strickland stood in front of Israel Adesanya as Israel Adesanya smirked back at him to be like, you've got me. You've found out who I am. And you've done the thing. And Sean, in that cerebral moment, that 5th round, that last 10 seconds of the 5th round, forget all the fighting before. That is the most beautiful moment in that entire fight, because we got to see both of them for who they really, really are.
Who do you believe that Sean Strickland and Israel Adesanya are right now in 2023?
I think Sean Strickland is a man with a set of skills that can be beaten and will be beaten, right? I think Israel Adesanya is somebody that needs to take a long, hard look at what he wants to be and what he wants to do. He's made the millions. I don't think money's an issue. He has cemented a legacy in this middleweight division. And the question for Israel Adesanya now is, can he find a way to recoup and get back to something of his old prowess? Now, I'll just preface by, I have been a vast supporter of Israel's style, not necessarily his person, but his style. And I will always back a fighter to go out and win a fight, especially a title fight, rather than go out and perform in a title fight. But when you look at the results that Israel has had over the last 10 months, 12 months, that's not the story that we had coming up when he was undefeated and it was absolute destruction of almost every fighter. If Israel Adesanya that fought Paulo Costa was fighting Sean Strickland, I think we'd be here talking and lauding a performance of Israel Adesanya. But it's not the same human. And results and facts must speak for themselves. Israel was not able to continue round 2. He was not able to do the things that we've seen previously where he makes adjustments to adjustments. The Rob Whittaker fights were wars, right? He was able to make adjustments to Rob's adjustments. They were fantastic performances. Sean Strickland is not, or has not reached the ceiling of the skill set of somebody like a Rob Whittaker or somebody like an Israel Adesanya in terms of their absolute peak. But if he's able to go out and put beautiful, perfect simplicity to such effective use against somebody of the ceiling, we have to recognize that the ceiling has dropped, right? And so,
yeah,
go on.
That's the thing here. I at the same time, even though it was a tremendous performance, I don't think we can get it was a tremendous performance, but we can't get too excited about the
100%.
level of Sean Strickland is, to be honest, because he's not really in comparison to other great fighters. He has a clunky style, he has an awkward style. But he has a style that you can figure out, and you can put him in some awkward situations. I just feel that whether it was for whatever reason or another, Israel was unable to do that. Now, I think the proving ground for Izzy would be maybe to come back and maybe try and get that title again. Does he deserve it? Does he not? That's maybe that's something that we're going to talk about right now. Do you put him in there within the media? What do you think should happen in comparison to what you think is going to happen? I think is the fair question here.
Okay, so what should happen is Dricus du Plessis versus Sean Strickland for the title.
Yes.
That's what should happen.
I agree.
What will happen is Israel Adesanya versus Sean Strickland in a rematch.
And Israel's pulling power is going to get him right in, because I heard a lot of people say, oh, if Aljamain Sterling didn't get the rematch, Izzy shouldn't get the rematch. But Israel Adesanya is a star inside the UFC. He's got pulling power. He's got pay-per-view buys and draw power as well. So the UFC, of course, are going to stick him back in there. And I don't agree with that, but that's the way they have been running the business for the last little while. And I think that's the way they'll continue running the business. I think the only person that will stop Israel Adesanya getting the rematch is Israel Adesanya himself, if he doesn't really want that, or if he wants to give himself the time off. But I'm thinking if you shoot for that now for maybe UFC 300, that gives Israel a lot of opportunity to come back and maybe redeem himself in that fight as well. We also have Paulo Costa. We also have Khamzat Chimaev as well. And I think the guy who's laughing most, obviously, if he can get over Paulo Costa, is probably Khamzat Chimaev, who I felt probably would, if he got to the title shot with Izzy. What I was expecting was for Chimaev to expose him in the grappling department, but and exposing in the grappling. I was going to say not for Sean Strickland to expose him in the striking. I think exposing is a little bit too harsh of a statement there, for maybe a lack of a better term. I wasn't expecting. I'm just blown away about how easy it was for Sean Strickland in the end. And I mean, yeah, it's just crazy. To go out and the way you go out like that in kind of fighting and losing in the kind of ways you've been beaten, guys, must fuck with your head mentally. And it'll be very interesting to see if Izzy has it in him to kind of bounce back and to come back and do it. I think if he can get his motivation, if he gives himself enough rest, I think he can come back and he can win that belt off Sean Strickland. But if he comes back and he takes a prolonged period of time off and somebody else is there, there's a chance that we never see Israel Adesanya as the middleweight champion again. And I think if he does even do it against Sean Strickland, it could be only for a short period of time, with the likes of Khamzat Chimaev coming up and a couple of the other challengers as well. But how do you kind of foresee the next year or so playing out in the middleweight division?
I think it really depends, right? Like, I don't think Khamzat Chimaev is going to have too much of a problem against Paulo Costa, if I'm really honest. Paulo Costa hits hard, obviously, but doesn't move his head well. I don't think we've seen fantastic defensive grappling from him. And so that's the type of fight that Khamzat Chimaev will just eat up, I imagine. In terms of Israel, I think you mentioned a really interesting point, right? And that's the time off. Think about the clip that he's been fighting at in, 5 years in the UFC?
Yeah, we mentioned it on the preview show. Like, we get one of the most active champions and everything like that. And, that is going to come back. And I look at the activity, but I also look at the mental drain that he's had over the last year as well. Coming in against a guy who had beaten him in kickboxing and all the drama, winning the first fight with Alex Pereira, then losing it towards the end. Coming in there, after losing that fight with the emotion of getting knocked out, lots of highs and lows, which can be mentally draining for you as well. And going through all of that, probably, one of the most exciting rivalries in the UFC between him and Alex Pereira, and then you're throwing Sean Strickland 4 or 5 months later. It's a little bit of a come down, and that's why I'm wondering, did he have enough motivation? Because you need to find that fire. You need to find the reason. I talked to I'm going to could get myself in trouble when I say this. So I was talking to a couple of people offline, but I was talking about a lot of people who are kind of moving into, the YouTube boxing realm and going on camps and, calling themselves fighters and stuff like that. And, in certain ways, it's kind of insulting to real fighters, because when you're getting yourself prepared to go in there and fight at a higher level, at a professional level, you're preparing yourself to die inside of there. You're preparing yourself through your training to put your body at the absolute limits. And, you have a mentality that you will go out there and, someone is going to have to be pulled off you, or you're going to have to be pulled off somebody else if it gets to that far. And that's a real deep, dark place that you have to get to. And, there's not a lot of people going out there and fighting and calling themselves fighters after the fact, but there's a couple that are doing it. And I think, it is a little bit disrespectful to the people who are dedicating their lives to this and do prepare themselves. Like this is stuff that we don't talk about all that much, is that how deep, dark kind of mentally you have to get when you're preparing yourself to go in there. And when you're doing that on top of the physical damage as well, it takes its toll. It does take its toll. And, you know, it's a very interesting to see how Israel bounces back from this, because, you know, I don't even call this a make or break. I think the second fight against Alex Pereira was a make or break for him in his kind of, you know, whole career, to get that one back and to do it so convincingly. He'll be deadly disappointed that this doesn't happen, but I still think he'll have enough confidence to come back in and think that he can make a couple of adjustments. He can find that little bit of motivation now. He has the video evidence that, you know, Sean Strickland walked him down and Sean Strickland clipped him and Sean Strickland was shouting and disrespected him. No, like disrespecting him, I'll say that loosely at the end, by roaring in his face and stuff like that. So maybe that's the cannon fodder that Israel needs to kind of get himself up. But the true greats of mixed martial arts find a way to get themselves up time in and time out. And then when we're talking about the likes of the Demetrius Johnsons, the GSPs, the Silvas, the John Joneses, who, you know, have to also combat these feelings and these emotions as well, and who have constantly done it year in, year out until it was their time as well. And, you know, you look back at those kind of runs with a lot more respect, as well as we should look back at the modern day run of Israel Adesanya with respect. And, you know, he played his factor in mixed martial arts. He was an interesting character, and he's not done yet. But I think we're over a pinnacle of his era. I think that we're going to see a lot of ups and downs with Israel over the next couple of years. I think he has a couple of wins in him and probably a couple of losses in him as well, because, you know, when the target is on your back and everybody is studying for you, and you get that aura taken off you as well, you know, things can quickly change. And all the true greats have figured that out and have had that happen to them, except for John Jones. I guess it hasn't really had to happen. He's came close a couple of times, but not really. But this is why we fucking love mixed martial arts though, Harry, isn't it? This is why we love it. Like, I've 41 minutes into this talking about this fight. I feel like I'll go another 2 hours talking about it. We must continue. Any final thoughts, sir, that you'd like to kind of tell us before we move on to the co-main event?
I'm never making a pick ever again.
Tell me about it. At least I didn't make a video this time. Like that Dustin Poirier shout, and yeah, that fucking ruined me. But look, that's the beauty of mixed martial arts. It's like, you know, it can make you out to be the biggest genius in the world. Shout out Sam for the decision win for Strickland, and it can make you out to be the biggest fool in the world too at the same time, you know. So sometimes the more you know, the less you know, I guess. And that's mixed martial arts in a nutshell when we're trying to cover and analyze it. And yeah, that's the way it goes. I don't care. It's all exciting. You know, in certain terms, you know, it's not nice to be wrong, but it's enjoyable to be wrong too, because that means you're going to get shocked. You're going to experience a little bit of uncertainty. And, you know, mixed martial arts has a strange way of kind of making you forget about that until you get a result like we got last Saturday night as well. And I think that's why we love and adore the sport so much, and when it's flourishing and in the good times. We shall move on to the co-main event. Tuivasa and Alexander Volkov. And, you know, this wasn't really a masterpiece at all. It's pretty simple to break down here. Volkov came out here, Harry, looking sharp as fuck, and showed that, you know, he is head and shoulders above the skill level of Tai Tuivasa. There's no real simple other way to describe it other than that, in my opinion. What about you?
I like punishing Volkov. I really like him. He comes out and he uses his range, right? That's the first thing. He uses his range and he keeps Tai Tuivasa guessing. He lands a 1, he lands 1, he lands a 1, he lands a 1-2 and a body kick. The first sort of 2 or 3 minutes, absolutely everything finished with a body kick. And it was just wonderful to watch, because Tai Tuivasa now has to say, okay, well, look, I have to get inside, right? Because he's jabbing the face off me. My nose is already bust. We got problems. He's dropped me a couple of times. I've got back up. Fine. What are we doing now? Right? I have to get inside. Well, I can't get inside because he's body kicking me the entire time. He's showing me the knee. He's showing me some stuff. Like, this is this is not good. And so he just wades his way in. And as he wades his way in, Volkov's just meeting him with right hand after right hand after right hand. I wouldn't have had a problem if we'd have called the fight at the end of the first round. There was a vast flurry at the end, and Tuivasa was taking big old shots. And we know that Volkov doesn't have massive one-hitter-quitter power, and that's what you need to put Tuivasa like out. But I wouldn't have had a problem with it being stopped. The second round comes in, it's exactly more of the same. Tuivasa is more desperate. He eventually gets taken down off essentially an ankle pick. And then he's in mount, gets beat the fuck out of. And then we see the mighty. We see an Ezekiel for the longest time.
You must have been praising the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gods when you seen that getting locked in. Took his time and kind of made sure it was on. You know, not an easy choke to pull off, Harry. You will do much better of a job than I will be able to do in kind of explaining the intricacies of that choke. Break it down for me.
Sure. So it's a blood choke, right? But it's a blood choke mixed with a little bit of windpipe pressure. So generally, what Volkov did is he had his right hand and he was using his right hand across the back of the neck like a crossface. You don't want to turn the chin too far in, because if you turn the chin too far in, you could start to tuck your chin inside of the Ezekiel and start to work your chin inside the blood choke. So you want to try and keep the head pretty center on. Now that's difficult when you're cross-facing because the pressure of your shoulder is going to naturally drive the chin in. So Volkov starts to use his chest, the left side of his chest, to push Tuivasa's face back open and sort of into the center of his chest. Now, we're not looking at smother chokes or anything like that. I don't think we're going to see smother chokes in this level of MMA. But what Volkov then is doing is he's beginning to just pepper shots, right? Pepper shots with his left hand, body, whatever, starts pummeling inside. And then eventually he goes wrist over wrist, and he's bringing his left hand up and into the windpipe of Tuivasa. So he's connected.
And we're back. Sorry, I disconnected there for anyone that's listening.
No problem at all. What we were doing was we were just locking up an Ezekiel, right? So the cross face is in and the chest is over the face. We now take the left hand, or Volkov took his left hand, and he laced it wrist to wrist inside his own wrist, and he places a fist on the windpipe of Tuivasa. Now, the choke itself is sort of a scissoring motion. It's a scissoring motion whilst you're essentially stabbing your left hand into the windpipe. Now, as we saw, it took a little bit of time to finish Tuivasa because this isn't one of those chokes that's going to put you to sleep immediately. It's a slow, constricting blood choke alongside some windpipe pressure. Tuivasa did the right thing by trying to post up on the hips of Alexander Volkov, because it's going to be really difficult to start to peel hands when you can't see where they are and they're all locked up within each other, because Volkov has the choking hand, the left hand, in the middle of his chest, so you're just not going to get hold of it. However, he wasn't able to move the hips, and Volkov was able to get the tap. Just really lovely stuff from Volkov. Really, really lovely stuff. I do think, whilst I can't see this version of Volkov winning a title, I think there are holes in his game and whatever. The element that he's added is that he's so more willing to sit down on his shots and land damage. He's a real problem for a lot of guys now. A real problem. Like, okay, I don't think he beats Tom Aspinall. I'm not sure he beats Cyril Gagné. I'm not sure he beats what's the Russian fella?
Pavlovich.
I'm not sure he beats Pavlovich. I'm not sure he beats John Jones. He definitely doesn't beat John Jones.
He's kind of like a top 5 gatekeeper per se, 100%. I would imagine. I'm impressed because he's like, what is he now? Almost 60 fights deep into his mixed martial arts career, and he's coming out and showing some level of improvements here. Now, maybe that was a confidence that he brought into this fight against Tuivasa, even at this late stage of his career. Volkov, he probably felt deep inside of him that he was the better, more well-rounded, and this was a horrible stylistic matchup for Tuivasa. If it didn't go his way early, I picked Tuivasa by first round knockout. I went based off his last previous performances that, you know, maybe he coming off 2 losses in a row, you would have maybe changed a couple of things up, added a little bit of extra motivation, coming in fighting close to home soil as well, but it just didn't happen for Tuivasa. And I think Tuivasa's fun run up the heavyweight division is all but done now at this stage. And you know, maybe we'll see him in a couple of good fights, but we ain't going to see Tuivasa, in my opinion, in any title contention fights or anything like that. If Alexander Volkov is a gatekeeper for the top 5, maybe Tuivasa will become a gatekeeper for the top 10, 15 of the division. And, you know, there ain't nothing too wrong with that either at the same time. Alexander Volkov versus eventually Jay Elton Almeida needs to happen sometime down the line. That's what I'd like to see. I know Jay Elton has another fight coming up. Who is he taking on? Is that Curtis Blades he's taking on?
Could be Curtis Blades, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if he beats Curtis Blades, though, he's going to bypass Volkov.
Yeah, he's fucking nowhere near Volkov at that point.
Yeah. But howsoever, we'll see what happens with Volkov. It'll be interesting to see. He took home the second round submission win by Ezekiel choke over Tuivasa. Moving on to the next fight, Harry. And, this was a barn burner. There was no other simple way to describe this. And we've talked about how impressed we are with guys in defeat before, and Felipe dos Santos went out there as a young, hungry prospect in the 125-pound division at 7-0 and took on a veteran of the 125-pound division in Manel Kape and gave him everything that he could handle in this fight. And it was so exciting to watch, Harry, on both ends. I kind of belittle Kape, but there was stages of this fight where, I don't know, maybe I tweeted and maybe I wrote it in the group where, sometimes I watch fighters where I'm like, it almost hurts me how good that they are in certain scenarios where Kape, when he chose to kind of sit down on his punches in the pocket, the speed of his head movement and his hands was ridiculous. Like, it had me going, oh my goodness. Like, I was almost screaming myself on the couch. It was crazy to look at. But, the Santos didn't get caught up in the moment. He stayed moving forward. He landed some monster shots of his own. A little bit of inexperience, I think, may have cost the Santos in this fight, Harry. What's your feelings on what you've seen? So it has to be said, it has to be said, both of these guys took this fight on short notice too. So credit to them. And that's not an easy thing to do. But we've seen guys getting eaten alive by more experienced veterans, but not Felipe dos Santos in this fight. Harry?
I think I'd like to add a submission for round of the year for round one. Just Fair. Absolutely fucking unbelievable, these fellas. Both of them. I thought, from a technical perspective, I was so impressed at 7-0 for Dos Santos' ability to win the outside foot battle early. It was orthodox versus southpaw, and he decimated that outside foot battle. I was so impressed with his ability to go first because of his footwork winning. I was so impressed at the diversity of his strikes. I was so impressed at his shot selection. I was so impressed with his head movement, the way he faded away from shots coming in from Kape. He had Kape guessing so much in that first round. I think the one thing I said, and you've already said it, right? And, whatever. I've put here that there's a slight bit of inexperience in the pocket, and it's costing him.
Even his inability to even mix in a clinch or mix in a takedown to kind of change things up a little bit as well, I felt would have paid him huge dividends in that fight.
Right. And we get to it in the second round when he catches a kick and almost has Kape. He has a back body lock and runs Kape. But because he's so focused on jumping on his back, Kape just reverses easily, lands a few hammer fists, and here we are. And in the first round, instead of just getting up, he looks for triangles, right? What are we doing looking for triangles? This is 125 mixed martial arts. Nobody's getting a triangle from guard. Like, it's just fucking not happening. But I was so impressed with his pace. I was impressed with his durability. Remember, this is short notice. Manel Kape knew that he was fighting, right? They were looking for an opponent. So at the very least, he was in camp and ready. Felipe dos Santos could have been, and he wasn't, obviously, look at the shape on him, but he could have been sat at home fucking eating potato chips and got a call and said, "Oh, do you want to fight in a couple of days?"
He almost could do it eating a few potato chips too. He was looking fairly skinny and languidly there, even for one. I was like looking at this, I was like, is this guy 135 or 25? Because he could go down another way again. Like, he's a kid that hasn't even filled out in his body yet, but uses his kind of reach advantage with his hands and with his legs very well. And I was really impressed by his explosiveness too, but also by the set of balls he had in him to just kind of go, like, okay, he didn't go for the grappling, but he was having some good success on the feet. And, we could say the same about Sean Strickland too, who could have went towards his grappling. But when you're having that much success on the feet, it's hard to kind of switch it up. And I felt that, Dos Anjos probably thought that he could get at Kape, and he did, but it was ultimately Kape who was in moments of the fight, landing the more cleaner, more effective work. And I think that's why he ended up getting his hands raised in the end. But yeah, please continue.
So the thing for me is that Kape made an adjustment, right? And this is where the inexperience of Dos Santos will have failed him. Kape was battling in the first round to go first. He really desperately wanted to go first because that's where he's best, right? When he's going first and he's leading the dance. At the start of the second, he realized that Dos Santos was winning the outside foot battle and so wanted to go first, or was able to go first because of that. So Kape stopped trying to go first, and he would pull the second shot out of the Dos Santos counter and counter that. The combination, sorry, the second shot, the combination to counter that. And when he did so, he was stopping Dos Santos in his tracks because the shot he was landing was so accurate and so clean that Dos Santos wasn't going to carry on with the next layer of his strikes. Kape then found the openings. He slowed Dos Santos down by doing that. Dos Santos had to question what he was doing, and then the outside foot battle winning didn't matter as much, right? And so Kape was able to start to bring himself into the fight that way. There are two things I want to mention about the second round. The third round, to me, was the cut and dry round where Kape just started to really walk away with it. The quality was really on show, and the inexperience of Felipe Dos Santos was really on show.
And the fact that it was short notice, I think we could see that kind of, you know, a little bit of the pop coming away from his punches, and, you know, he's slowing down ever so slightly, which is to be expected when you've taken a fight at short notice as well.
100%. So the two things I wanted to mention, the first one was the spinning back elbow, or the ducking back elbow, the Yair Rodriguez elbow that landed on Manuel.
Unreal.
Couldn't believe it. And the second one is, you mentioned about Manuel Kape when he's in his bag and he's really working, that it's a sight to behold. Go and watch the final 2 minutes of that second round. He beats the shit out of Felipe Dos Santos, and he doesn't get touched once.
It's ridiculous. His head movement is like his head movement mixed with his hand speed is absolutely frightening. It's frightening. So it is. It's, oh man, it's like something I could just watch time and time again. Just say, rewind and watch back, rewind, watch back. It was unbelievable to watch. But, you know, maybe to kind of not to kind of step over the point you were going to make, but to maybe counteract that point, he needs to do it more often in fights. Great. I don't think he did it as often as he should have in this fight, and he ain't going to get away with doing it like that against more experienced guys.
I agree. And I think this is similar to Manuel Kape that we've talked about for his entire UFC career, right? He's got unbelievable wins on his resume. Absolutely unbelievable wins. The win against Kyoji Horiguchi is an absolutely incredible win. But we don't see that level of performance consistently. And we know it's in his locker because we saw it in the final 2 minutes. And I understand, you know, we also know he can make adjustments, because in that first round, he fought toe-to-toe. In the second round, he said, oh, fuck, I'm better than this fella. I can just make an adjustment. And he made the adjustment, and that's what won in the fight, right? Who knows what would have happened if we saw 2 more rounds like the first one? Who fucking knows? He could have got caught. He got clipped a number of times in that first round, but he made the adjustment, and he fought smartly. We need to see that more, right?
Kai Kara Francis, who he called out. Is that what happened? Look, we were basking in the beauty of his striking inside the cage, but absolutely cringing and kind of in a bit of disappointment with, you know, how emotional he got after the fight. Dropped the F-bomb, him and Radtke later on. Just shameful to see. Embarrassing as well. You know, I had, you know, Olivia's friend was in visiting. We were watching the fights, and we had guys dropping F-bombs left, right, and center. It was one of our first times watching mixed martial arts, and it's like, mixed martial arts, it give it and it take it away. You know, we have the good times, we have the bad times, and he didn't crown himself in too much glory, Harry, by getting too excited there. And it's not on. There should be no level of acceptance for it at all inside the UFC or inside any organization or in any day-to-day life interactions. Yeah, and I just thought that was worth the mention, and we'll talk about Radtke as well.
Agreed. Look, fighting is fighting, right? You've gone out, you've done the thing. I thought even the way he treated Felipe Dos Santos immediately after was a little bit off. Like, he grabbed up Felipe and like tried to lift him up and tried to congratulate him for the fight and whatever. Dos Santos didn't want any of it. right? Just leave your man alone. You've just had 15 minutes to touch each other and do whatever you want. Now's not the time, right? If you want to, if you want to shake hands, dap up, do whatever, that's fine. There's no problem. But when it's obvious that your opponent does not want to engage with you, just leave them alone. And we absolutely can't condone anything that was said in the post-fight interview. At the end of the day, you're on a UFC main card of a massive pay-per-view, whether we thought it was worthy of the pay-per-view or not. It's an absolutely giant pay-per-view, and that hemisphere of the world, a lot of people are watching it. And you have not done yourself or MMA a vast service in the way that you've conducted yourself. And I hope that the UFC clamp down on him very, very, very hard about that sort of behavior, because, look,
they're not going to do that.
Of course not. They're pricks,
we both know they're not going to do it, but that's what should happen. I mean, I was listening to Spencer and his thoughts on it today, where he would like to take away post-fight interviews. I don't agree with that at all, because you're taking away some very beautiful moments from other fighters when you do that. I think, it's up to the UFC to hold these guys responsible for what they say after a fight. And if they do say something outrageous, they do need to be punished for it. And that's how you kind of counteract that problem, not by banishing.
Don't take it from everyone, but if take him away from Kape, if he makes something like that, no more interviews.
No more interviews, 100%. Yeah, that's a very good compromise there. I think what we want to talk about next, I think I kind of know what you would say with the Santos. What we want is a similar level opponent, and a good tap on the back for taking this fight at short notice, but a fighter that I'm very excited to see. And even though he did say some outrageous shit, and he seems to be a pretty outrageous guy, I'm looking forward to seeing Manuel Kape in there again. And it's got to be Kai Kara-France. They've talked too much shit this week for that fight not to happen down the line, and that would be absolutely insane if it does happen as well. One fight that we weren't too really looking forward to looking at, Harry, was Justin Tafa versus Austin Lane, but it did produce a pretty spectacular knockout in the heavyweight division. A left hook which landed straight on the chin of Austin Lane, dropped him down. Justin Tafa got the finish inside 90 seconds really in the first round. Any quick thoughts on that?
I just said in my notes that Lane is he's quite dexterous for a heavyweight, moves well for a heavyweight, but Tafa's just a bomber. And if you're not considerably more skilled than Tafa, he's just going to barrel in and land shots just like he did. And whatever. It was a fight. It was a finish. It was what the crowd wanted. It's one of those things where, you roll through the Carlos Ulberg performance right on into that main card. Pedro looks like he looks. Tafa looks like he looks. Kape looks like he looks. Volkov destroys Tuivasa. Obviously, that's going to dampen the crowd slightly, but, they got to see a good fight, and then you roll into the main event. Really, for the UFC, that's about as perfect as a prelim headliner into a couple of fights in the main card goes. And this is exactly why this is where it is. This is where it is to do exactly that. Go in 90 seconds, somebody finish somebody, let's get on.
Exactly. This fight was like Ron Seal. It did exactly as it said on the tin, and that's what UFC wanted.
Brilliant reference.
Yeah. So I mean, that's what the UFC wanted. They wanted that kind of finish in the fight. They got it. And they got another one in the fight before that again with Tyson Pedro and Anton Turkaji. A good knockout win for Tyson Pedro, and one that in the aftermath looked fairly obvious that was going to happen from what we've seen in the fight. A nice jab and cross to a couple of coffin nails, putting into Anton Turkaji's night within 2 minutes and 12 seconds of the first round. Harry, your thoughts on Tyson Pedro? Tyson Pedro went in and did what he normally does against this kind of level of opponent, really. Would that be fair to say? Yeah,
I mean, I think he's not only just ended Turkaji's night, I think he's probably ended Turkaji's UFC career, at least this time around. I just don't think it's the right time for Anton Turkaji. Maybe he can go away and rebuild and come back. But Tyson Pedro is a guy that's very, very hit and miss, right? If you feed him this level of opponent, he will win. If you feed him a level of opponent a couple of rungs after, it's dicey. He might win, he might lose. And if you feed him anything above that, he's definitely not going to win, right? He just smacks a little bit of the Jimmy Crute that when he's on, he looks great. And when he's not on, he looks absolutely horrendous. He looked big in here. He looked clean. He looked crisp. He looked focused. Looked like he was really hurting Turkaji with some of those shots. And yeah, I just right hand over the top, shot down the pipe, hammer fist, murked him. Great stuff. Fair play to him.
Absolutely. And I have to say, a very good kind of celebration as well with the samurai sword. Did you enjoy that one?
Agreed. I'm all for that.
Yeah, I like that fun. Let's talk a little bit about Carlos Ulberg against Daton Jung. Rear naked choke finish at 4:49 of the I think it says 4:49, but it probably should say 4:59 of the third round, a fight that was overturned, and an excellent job by the officials that didn't catch the tap originally from Jung, and they went on to kind of review it on the video and do exactly as they're supposed to do, and they did a fantastic job, and credit to them as well. But talk to me about Carlos Ulberg's performance. Pretty dominant, pretty one-sided, enough to make Sean call him a title contender, maybe a possible future champion. I don't know about that one myself yet. I think I want to see a little bit more, but he's definitely looking very well-rounded and has moved to 9-1 after that win. And I think he's going to be a good player in the, if things go his way in the 205-pound division. He's going to cause a couple of upsets there. Would you agree?
I think I agree with Sean.
I think he would be, yeah.
I think the ceiling is there. Right. I think, is he able to bolt on the skills to get there? I don't know. Right. I don't know. But he moves so well for a 205-pound guy. I really like how he picks his shots. I like how he'll go 20%, 50%, 70%, and then back down to 20% with his shots. So you never quite know what's going to land, where it's going to land, what efficacy, what damage, what power, what should I be blocking, what should I be moving from. Daton Jung is obviously not going to be a title contender at any time soon, but the first round from Ulberg was really, really, really good. Really good performance. The thing I struggle with Ulberg is that he slows, right? And he doesn't make it.
I'm wondering about 5 rounds. I'd love to see him, you know, getting that litmus test over 5 rounds to see if he can kind of maintain what he brings to the table. But like, dangerous on the feet. He's got some good wrestling. Obviously, he's got a submission in him as well. Not a thing, you know, there's a difference between, like we said in the main event, fighting not to lose and fighting to win. And he chose to fight to win, and he chose to fight to win by decision and by, you know, putting yourself in a position where you're going to try and finish a fight towards the end when you're already winning a one-sided, lopsided decision. I think that gives me a lot of respect for Ulberg, as well as that he has that like little bit of killer instinct in him to go out there and push for the finish right until the final bell, and that's exactly what he did here.
Yeah, I mean, he was getting beat up in the first couple of minutes of that third round. Daton Jung knew he needed a finish, and so came out really, really, really strong. And you know, as I said, Ulberg tires as we get into that third round, and he asked the corner in between the second and the third. He said, "What are you expecting?" And Eugene Behrman said he's going to try and pull punches, and he's going to try and hit you really fucking hard. Like, he knows he needs a finish here, so make sure you stay on your P's and Q's. And regardless of the staying on the P's and Q's, Carlos got hit, and got hit a lot. Like, obviously he wasn't getting pucked around the place or anything, but that first 2 minutes was a tough 2 minutes, and he managed to find a way to turn it around, get to the back body lock, and where we are. I thought the one thing I was really impressed with actually from Ulberg was his control on the ground and his ability to continue landing damage whilst finding control positions. I really like the half Nelson that he was using to keep Daton Jung turned and forcing Daton Jung to make a decision. Does he want to give up mount, or does he want to go belly down back mount?
And that showcases a high level of grappling ability, where you're giving kind of, you know, it's the which road to destruction do you want to go down. You can go down this way and I'm going to do one thing, go down that way and you're going to do another thing. And that's what I loved about his kind of control and finish on the ground. Ultimately, he gave Daton Jung the chance to kind of roll to his belly, ended up securing in the rear naked choke, like I said, with 1 second to go in the round. And look at, are we going to just fucking mess around here all day, or are we going to put him in there with Alexander Volkov? Are we going to find out if he can become championship material? Is that too big of a jump for him? Because
weight classes. Volkov's heavyweight, right?
Oh, that's right. Oh, duh. Sorry, I don't know why I said that. Yeah, wrong weight class there.
So the name I had, and this is a fuck around and find out. What about Johnny Walker?
Johnny Walker is fighting in a title eliminating fight very soon against Ankalaev. So that's probably going to be a stretch too far for Carlos, but something similar. What about
if they chose
Anthony
Smith?
Anthony Smith. That seems to be the one. Yeah, that seems to be the one. Poor old Anthony.
Brutal.
Yeah, and that's going to be a fair jump in competition for Ulberg. But at this stage of his career, Harry, you know, you can't be waiting around all that much. He's 32 years of age right now, and he's got to make it happen. I got to say, he's a devilishly handsome gentleman as well. He is. Could be up there now, one of the best looking men inside the UFC. He could be coming after who would be considered.
I mean, it used to be Luke Rockhold's title, right?
But yeah, Rockhold, I guess. Who else would have been that? Alan Joubran would have been another good one as well. But yeah, Carlos Ulberg coming in hot for that title. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he progresses in his career in the light heavyweight division. And I like that Anthony Smith fight. I think we need to give him that test. Next, we saw a pretty nasty injury for our boy Jack Jenkins, obviously coming out with those devastating calf. It started this fight well, and this was shaping out, Harry, to be a really interesting kind of fight, and it was a really competitive fight and a really well match-made fight too. And Chepe Marcial was hanging on in there too with Jack. This was a bruiser of a fight, and you know, you can't even call it a mistake, really. I know a little bit of a mistake to kind of put your arm out to try and brace it. You never should do that. Ask Shogun Rua against Mark Coleman the first time they fought. It was something similar along those lines, where you know your natural reaction is to put your arm out to brace your fall, but just the way that the kind of throw or the trip was kind of locked up, it gave him the inability to take the weight off his arm eventually, and all the weight went down on his arm. What we seen was a dislocated elbow for Jack Jenkins in the second round, midway through. Talk to me about what you've seen between the two of these gentlemen before that unfortunate injury happened.
A fantastic round. Really fantastic round. Like, the thing that I like about Chepe Mariscal is that for what he doesn't have in pure skill, he makes up for in cardio and toughness and durability and willing. Like, Jack Jenkins was the more accurate striker, right? He was certainly finding Chepe Mariscal with really, really clean shots. And a lot of shots, I think, would have dissuaded many a fighter. But Chepe Mariscal just took them and kept trucking, kept coming forward, kept landed with variety, forced Jack Jenkins onto the back foot a lot of that first round, was looking and divvying up and looking for takedowns and coming into clinches, and really made this an MMA fight for Jack Jenkins. And I was very, very impressed. And look, sure, the way that it ended in the second was really, really devastating. That's never a way that you want to see a fight end. Because it's one of those injuries that you don't know how that's going to carry on for the rest of Jack Jenkins's career, right? We've seen fighters that dislocate shoulders or bones in various places, and they're just never right again. You know, who was it? Was it Mike Perry that he was throwing shots and dislocated his shoulder and had to pop it back in mid-round? I can't remember who it was.
You
remember, right?
Aaron Pico. It happened to Aaron Pico. It happened to Korean Zombie against Jose Aldo.
Yeah.
It's happened to a couple of people where we've seen it. Yeah. And it's a kind of a one. I know a guy back home, one of my friends, who dislocated his shoulder once before, and you know, had to constantly deal with it popping out. You know, once it goes once, it, you know, if it doesn't break and you're not putting any pins on it, you know, if you pop your shoulder, you pop your elbow, a dislocation sometimes can be worse than a fracture or an actual break, because, you know, you have that weakness there that will constantly exist. And I'm sure he's going to be dealing with a couple of ruptured tendons and damaged ligaments as well, because that was a nasty one. You could see it popping out, and it's not the way I wanted a fight to end, because it was a fascinating fight. It was well matched, like I said, and, you know, there was stages where both of these fighters were showing that they could maybe drive on and win this, but ultimately Mariscal got the win by submission, by verbal tap out per se, for lack of a better term, from the injury. And we wish Jack Jenkins a speedy recovery. And Chepe Martial, a guy I'm looking forward to seeing again. He showed me enough there that makes me want to see this guy in action again at 145. Let's throw him in there with Paul Hughes. Next, as we move on to Jamie Mullarkey and Jung Makdessi in the 155-pound division, Harry, and another fight that delivered. Look at, I should have mentioned it at the start of the podcast, but shout out to my guy, Irish Dalton. I took it, let's just say I took a trip to Italia to watch this pay-per-view, Harry, and got it at a very reasonable price as well at the same time, where I was giving out about people having to pay for this card. But, you know, we did also say, and I think it was righteous of me to kind of give out about this card because we were paying for you know, on paper value before the pay-per-view happens. But this pay-per-view did deliver through all the fights that we've talked about so far, all the fights that we're going to talk about, including Mullarkey, Makdessi, and we'll talk about Haqprast and Quinones just a moment as well. Mullarkey and Makdessi was a real good fight as well, really competitive throughout 3 rounds.
Agreed. Makdessi always, he just surprises me with the thing that he just surprises me all the time, right? And it's just that in fights, he's just competitive all the time, and he's getting on, and he's had a long career in the UFC and all that stuff. But the style that he's cultivated still works, right? You see the spinning shit from him, you see the spinning back elbow and the spinning back fist, and he loves the spinning side kick and all this stuff. But the thing that I loved in this fight was the traversal of ranges. John Makdessi slightly shorter in his range as well. And Mullarkey was using his jab well, using the teep, using the body kicks really, really well, controlling the range for about 2.5 minutes of the first round. And then Makdessi just started to step inside and started to find him and started to get his own range working. And Mullarkey had to make his adjustments. And just over the 3 rounds, it was just a really, really enjoyable back and forth fight. A great well-matched fight, good levels between the two of them. Obviously, neither of them are going to be knocking on title contentions ever in their UFC career, but both UFC level fighters, and I really, really enjoyed it. Yeah, fair play to both of them.
And I think we could say the same about the next fight as well, with Haqprast and Quinones. A really kind of a good battle, but, you know, one that showed Nasrat Haqprast's level as well, and, you know, in his ability to make fights maybe a little bit more difficult than they should be for him, but, you know, came out with a heavy heart, obviously, after the tragedy that happened in Morocco, bearing the Moroccan flag, and, you know, did very, very well to even put himself in a position to kind of go in there and, you know, battle those emotions too, on top of what was a really kind of back and forth fight. But a fight nonetheless that Nasrat Haqprast deserved to win, in my opinion.
I agree. This fight is one of the reasons why Nasrat Haqprast frustrates me so much, because Quinones was the more versatile and varied MMA fighter. Nasrat just headhunts. And it's not until he has his man hurt and beat up a bit that he starts to go to the body. And I just wish, because he headhunts so well, and when he's striking and flowing, the shots come so cleanly upstairs, that if he just invests 20% more in shots downstairs, he would be able to land with an even larger clip upstairs, because fighters would have such a defensive awareness of what was coming in both different directions. And Quinones, okay, solid fighter, but Nasrat Haqprast of 5 years ago, when we're talking about him, you know, really climbing the upper echelons, is a guy that we would expect Haqprast to absolutely decimate. And the performance here is everything good, and everything frustrating about Nasrat Haqprast. I just wish he had evolved from the guy that we saw come into the UFC and show us the slick boxing and some of the takedown defense and some of the sit down of the punches, but he just hasn't. And that's, oh, fuck, that's frustrating.
Yeah, it's kind of, he reminds me a little bit of Miroslav Bektic. Remember him? Is that he kind of showed us a certain level of it, but never really kind of catapulted himself or leveled up from that, or never drove on from some of the good performances that we got to see in there. But yeah, I agree. Look, there's a couple of fun fights left there for both of those guys, but I think it would be a step too far to think that we're going to see them in the top 15 in their careers in the lightweight division. Moving on to the 70-pound division, Charles Radtke took on Blood Diamond in a all right performance. Look at Radtke beat up a really bad fighter and a non-UFC caliber fighter in Blood Diamond here, and then went out and dropped an F-bomb and absolutely just shat on his performance anyway and made it completely irrelevant. What are your thoughts on what you've seen in the actual fight, Harry?
The only thing I will give, and I'm not going to give Radtke any props, right? It is what it is. If you're going to speak like that after a performance, then I'm not going to spend time on this podcast talking about you. But the one thing I will say for Blood Diamond is previously, you ran over, you touched Blood Diamond's legs, and he was down on the floor looking at takedowns and not being able to get back up. I was impressed with the improvements at 35 years of age for him to still be bolting. Like, look, don't get me wrong, he's not a UFC level fighter at all. Me saying he can stuff a takedown is absolute bare minimum that he should be for an MMA fighter. But he is where he is, and the performances are what they are. And I will give him props for clearly going out and investing in his cage wrestling. He even hits an Uchimata throw on Radtke for a half a second. And so, you know, don't get me wrong, he's absolutely not UFC caliber.
Spending a little bit of time with Craig Jones on the mat, I would say. Would you reckon? I think, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so props to him that even at 35, when, you know, lots of fighters are thinking about winding down their careers, he's still adding skill sets, and that's still demonstrable in the cage. So fair play to him. No problem with the performance, no problem with the result, but fair play to him for still looking to add skills. That gets mad props from me.
Fair play to him. Still shy. As we sorry, I'm only messing now. That's too hard. But speaking of poor performances and really letting yourself down, we kind of went out of our way to talk up a fighter like Shane Young on the preview show last week, Harry, and then he goes out there and he misses weight by 3 or 4 pounds and gets choked out inside a minute. And that's surely the last that we're going to see of Shane Young inside the UFC octagon.
Shane Young is just a really sad story to me. He is a guy that fell off a cliff bigger than we have seen. And I think we're still right in what we said, that his record does not speak to the level of skills that he has. But there was a moment in that first round where Miranda threw a teep kick, and when Shane Young took it, it looked like it sent a proper jolt through his whole body. And immediately my brain, and I wrote in my notes, I said, oh, he can't take any more shots anymore. He just can't. Like, if a body teep is causing your body to stiffen up like that, we have some serious, serious problems. Now, the actual transition from Miranda was really nice. He caught a low kick, and as Shane Young started to turn, he forced the leg inside to start to off-balance Shane Young, caught a hip grip, and sort of almost forced Shane Young into the turtle position that he wanted him. As he gets there, laces a body triangle, wraps up a rear naked choke, and we're done, right? But very, very impressive finish from Miranda. But honestly, and I know that we shouldn't say this, and I have no right to say this, but because I care for the fighters, I'm going to say this. I really need Shane Young to take a long look at whether he wants to fight, not just in the UFC, but ever again. Because when I see fighters react, their bodies react to shots like Shane Young's did, I am questioning significantly whether we need to be taking more damage as a UFC fighter or as a fighter in general.
Absolutely fair assessment there, and I can't argue too much with what you said there. To finish off, we'll finish off the breakdowns, but what started us on Saturday night was Kevin Jousset against Ireland's Kiefer Crosbie. It didn't go Kiefer Crosbie's way. We had, the first half of the round was a little bit over and back, but I kind of got the feeling that Jousset was feeling his way into this fight a little bit. And he kind of did as the fight progressed, although Kiefer did have some success with a couple of shots over the top. But it was the damage and the low calf kick that seemed to really bother Kiefer here and take him out of his stride. Based off his a video that he said today, he reckoned that he checked that first calf kick and fractured his shin bone, which would have, cost him quite a bit there. That's a tough one to take early in the fight. It happened as well. Look, maybe that was on the back of your mind hearing that, just towards the end of the fight, a small lapse in concentration, going for the judo throw, giving up his back so easily, and subsequently giving up the choke so easily is something that Kiefer will be disappointed about. But I don't want to be too harsh on him. Look, I think we spoke fairly about it, in that I think everybody would be in agreement that at this stage of Kiefer's career, he's not going to make a run up the rankings. But I definitely think he has the capabilities to beat some competition inside the UFC. And I don't want to be too critical on him based off the circumstances that he faced and taking the fight at short notice, at welterweight over in Australia and against a much bigger guy on the night inside the cage as well. So I had it all stacked up against him. But he fought a guy, Harry and Kevin Jousset, that you shone your severe spotlight on this week as well. And, I was very impressed by his performance and how he handled Kiefer's pressure early. And ultimately, showing his well-roundedness by taking up and snatching that opportunity of the rear naked choke at the end of the first round.
For sure. I mean, I thought it was actually quite a competitive striking battle. I think that Kiefer, whilst vastly outsized, they looked completely different weight classes on the night. I thought Kiefer landed with significant power, marked up Jousset, and certainly made him defensively aware of the striking of Kiefer. I just think Kevin Jousset realized when he got in there that he had the size and he had the physical difference in the clinch exchanges. I was impressed with Jousset's use of the clinch. I was impressed with his ability to tie up Kiefer into certain positions and then land uppercuts in the clinch. I was impressed by his jab, although I think Kiefer was probably the quicker fighter. And it makes sense now that if he has fractured his shin, that would have obviously vastly taken away some of the tools that Kiefer was using, and one of the reasons why he switched stance so early. But I think Kiefer was the quicker fighter, but Jousset just had a measured jab and would just keep pumping it out there and pumping it out there and pumping it out there. Now, look, it's one thing for a fighter to make a mistake. There's another thing for a fighter to capitalize on a mistake and finish a fight, right?
Yeah.
And so Kiefer going for the judo throw, sure, he telegraphed it, and that's a mistake. I think not necessarily going for it, right? It doesn't really matter if you're a judo black belt or not, or a European champion or a this or a whatever. We have seen wrestlers taken down before. We have seen strikers knocked out before, right? It's not to say that
it's just more the timing. It was just the timing of it at the end of the round, as well as that, it might not have bared any relevance on the round, whatnot. And, I think maybe Sean said it on the big podcast. It was exactly my thoughts as well, as that, Kiefer needed to get back in there and reset. And I was actually looking forward to seeing him coming out, because we had seen Kiefer in that kind of position before where, he might have been taking some damage, but he's always in the fight. And he always has a way to kind of, maybe turn it into a bit more of a battle. And I think, he tried to do that in round one, but obviously when if you're dealing with a fractured shin and, you're kind of comprehending all of those thoughts at the same time. And he's also very unfortunate that he's kind of stuck in this kind of tweener weight. Whereas that he's probably a little bit he's too small for 170, and he has a difficult time to get down to 155. He's often talked, and we spoke about it like that on the old triangle that's yet to come out. It'll be out on Wednesday. We recorded it yesterday, but it was like we said that he's unfortunate there. He probably is perfect for around 165 pounds or in around that, or 160 pounds. But the decision for him, I was kind of wondering, should we see him at 155 or should we see him at 170? And I think it'd be only fair to Kiefer to give him another crack at a full camp at 170 and see how he can do on another card, whether that's, if it's a fractured ankle now, probably won't be until next year. But Jousset is a guy that I can feel can make a few waves inside that welterweight division. Harry, what do you think?
So I think Jousset needs to... I think the win against Kiefer will age well. Like, I think you're right. Kiefer's not going to go out and win a UFC title. He's not going to go out and get a ranking next to his name in that 175-pound division. If he can make 155 and he can do it safely, one thing I would say for Kiefer, if you have a full camp, get yourself out to the UFC PI and deal with them. Use the resources that are available to you and see. If they can tell you you can get to 155 and you can do it safely, listen to them. Because I think he is, in the UFC anyway, he's a 155-pound fighter for his size and his physicality. Now, obviously, if he's able to do that and do it safely is not a question for me to answer. But if he is, I would go down that route. If not, obviously, 170 is the answer. But for Kevin Jousset, I think he has to add a little bit more to the striking, right? I think some of the options that Kiefer was able to exploit are going to be exploited to a far greater degree as he moves up the division. But his potency for finishing was what impressed me, right? His ability when he dropped Kiefer to the mat to lace both a body triangle, to land a damaging shot, and lock up a choke inside about 2.5 seconds was very, 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 very impressive. I really liked how he switched from palm to palm to a regular grip. Yeah, all in all, just a solid performance in terms of turning a mistake into not just a winning position, but a fight-ending position. And I think I agree that if he can continue to build, now he's 30 years old, right? So he's another one that if we're going to push him,
we got to get a move on with Kevin. Yeah.
But if he can add some skills and round out some of the game, I'm interested in him. Let's see it. I'm interested.
Yeah, as am I. Nonsensical call out in calling out Ian Gary, Harry.
I mean, what's he doing?
Yeah, stupid. Absolutely stupid. What would you like to see for a more realistic matchup for him?
Paul Hughes. If not, then then Alex Morono.
Yeah, like it. I like it. I like that a lot. Let's do it. Yeah, perfect. Any final thoughts to see us out here, Harry?
Look, I think this is a card that we might look back on and see as the beginning of another era in the middleweight division. I don't necessarily think it's the Sean Strickland era, but I think we might see a chasm of power era. And that will be, I think the title will change hands quite swiftly and a number of times over the next little while. I don't know whether Khamzat Chimaev is going to be around in the UFC for long. He seems to be all over the place and doesn't seem to be able to be stable in his fights. You know, he came in and had 70,000 fights in 3 days, and then now he's been nowhere to be seen for a year and a bit. And so if he comes in and wins a title, we could see another long reign. But if not, I can see that title changing hands significantly over the next few years. And that's interesting, right? That's entertaining for fans, and fans will like that. Over and above, though, I thought it was a really, really good card. Again, over and over again, we've sort of looked at certain cards on paper, and just like our picks, we've said on paper this isn't great, and in practice it seems to always deliver. And so I think we must give props to the UFC matchmakers for that, for believing in their cards, believing in their card placements, and fair play to the fighters for going out there and putting their lives on the line for our entertainment. And long may it continue. Roll on the next one.
Absolutely. The next one will be UFC, not UFC Fight Night. I don't know what you want to call it. Alex or Valentina Shevchenko will try and take back her crown against the champion Alexa Grasso, plus another couple of fights. We will, of course, be back later on this week to preview that card in full. At BJJ_Harry Powell is where you'll find that man across from me. At O'Neill MMA is where you'll find me. Head over to SevereMMA and check out the Severe Spotlight on Kevin Jousset, and an excellent write-up each and every Monday. Check out Harry over on Patreon as well. Until then, guys, take care of yourselves, and we'll